What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up? How's it going? Welcome to a podcast, my podcast. I really should make these podcasts a little bit more organized and maybe schedule some guests at some point. I know a lot of people want to go on and talk, but I'm just super busy and I can't have a proper schedule. Anyway, today, what I wanted to talk about was something that happened during SHOT Show. I had a conversation with my brothers, Sal Mascoli, which, by the way, you can check them out at IDO_tactics. I'm going to create a banner on that. And I was having a conversation with him and Instructor Zero. And we were talking about, sorry, I'm just going to create this banner right here. We were talking about knife to gun transitions and why they're mostly bullshit. It kind of hurt my feelings at first because I actually practice knife to gun transitions. But then they discussed it with me and I could not ignore the logic behind it. And I want to share those things with you. Now, I say knife to gun transitions are mostly bullshit because there are some. I wonder if I can add this banner. Well, there we go. There you go. Okay, follow those guys. So I'm going to refer to, Sal Mascoli, Instructor Zero, and Jared Wihungi when talking about why knife to gun transitions are mostly bullshit and why it hurt my feelings. So knife to gun transitions, I'm going to demonstrate some live right now. I might mess it up, but you see it on Instagram. You see Filipino martial arts do it who, also dabble in firearms. You see a lot of firearms guys do it who, dabble in knife work. They go something like this. Something like this. I'm doing, by the way, I'm not wearing proper gear, all right? I'm wearing a regular belt with a duty holster, and it's a little bit loose. Sal, where's my duty holster, bro? But anyway, it goes something like this. It goes something like that, where it's usually from a static position, and maybe they've got like a bob dummy, and it's like strike, boom, bang. Or, maybe they're doing some blah, 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 FMA, knife, gun. A lot of people do that stuff. I'm going to try to do it fast, maybe induce failure. There we go. It's a duty holster, by the way. It's a little bit tougher. Bang, boom. And the logic that's often cited is that in close quarters, right, you may need to create distance, and you create distance using this blade before going to your firearm. That's the general defense for the, knife to gun transition. Is that you kind of use the knife to create distance. Shout out Kian Wu. There you go. There's your shout out. What's up, Bicha? Cool. So let's talk about this. Why is knife to gun transition mostly bullshit? So we're going to discuss why it's mostly bullshit. And then we're going to discuss when it's not bullshit and the parameters with which you might actually go from your knife to your gun. There are some real situations where it might not be bullshit. But I'll tell you why I do it. I'll tell you first why I do it. Because it looks fucking cool, number one. And it's a mental challenge. It's part of my martial art. My martial art is exploring the totality of things, right? Understanding things from a surface level, exploring it up until I earn my way to a more meaningful, in-depth understanding. And sometimes going through this process, I get my feelings hurt. I get my feelings hurt because I love doing this shit so much. And even, we're going to Mexican carry this, even from Oh God. Like even from concealment, right? Like I'm gonna put this here. I've done stuff where it was like bang, boom, transition, then go to gun. Like I've done all sorts of crazy ninja stuff that it looks cool, you know, it gets the clicks on Instagram, but doesn't make logical sense. I've gone through this process many times. So why is knife to gun transition mostly bullshit? Well, whew. A knife, what is it? Is this a lethal or non-lethal tool for defense? Right? Hands up if you think this is a non-lethal tool for defense. Right? Okay. Right. This is not, right? That's non-lethal, right? But this is a lethal tool for defense, right? A firearm is a lethal tool for defense. Now, let's assume that you're carrying both a firearm, right, and a knife. Let's assume you're doing this lawfully. All right, that's the first assumption. You're carrying both a gun and a knife lawfully. All right. Okay, good. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. By law in the US, it is the same as a firearm. They're both lethal tools for defense, right? Okay. So let's continue with this train of thought. If I'm carrying both a knife and a gun for self-defense, and I'm lawfully, legally justified to use lethal force, why would I go to my knife, a thing that requires me to close the distance and then use it to gain distance so that I can transition into my firearm? And I thought, well, there's got to be a reason. And there are reasons, but for the most part, you guys can begin to see why, if I am lawfully, legally, forget about morally and ethically and all that stuff, that's up for another conversation. But if I was in a condition, a self-defense condition, where I am lawfully justified to use lethal force, why would I elect to go to my knife first? I mean, if a knife is all I had, yeah, that makes sense. We're talking about knife to gun transitions, guys. Okay, so why would I choose to go to my knife first and then go to my gun? Right? These are both lethal force options. We know that earning time and space is a high value priority when it comes to these things. Why would I go here first? Why would I not just use whatever I might have been doing with this, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, a push, a shove, whatever, and then go to gun? Why would I go here first? And I'm like, God dang, I was in Las Vegas. I've had a few drinks. I'm having a conversation with Sal Mascoli, who is like a 25-year law enforcement dude in a place. Y'all know where Sal's from, but just, okay, look, cops, right? Like, not all cops are created equal. Not all jurisdictions are created equal. Some places, right? When you tell me, oh, I'm a law enforcement officer from, small town Connecticut, like that's a very different job than law enforcement officer 25 years in a place like New York City, in a place like Chicago, in a place like Las Vegas, Miami, right? Very different. So Sal's been a cop in a metropolitan city for 25 years, maybe more. Was a United States Marine. Again, this is not an appeal to authority, right? Like, this is just framing my um, my conversation with them. And to a degree, it's important. And then there's Instructor Zero. Y'all know, you guys can look him up. He's a firearms training specialist, amongst other things. And I filmed them having this conversation why it makes no sense. And again, they were very wary also to like, they're very diplomatic because there's a lot of people who train knife gun, or at least show it on YouTube or on Instagram. Me being one of them, but these are my boys, right? So it's like they're not afraid to hurt my feelings. They know I'm in search of truth, and it made sense to me. And I'm like, damn, okay. And this is why I say, and I mention it all the time, guys, like seek credible training. What I do is a martial art. What I do is for my own exploration. I often do things to build attributes. I often do things as a matter of artistic self-expression. And the cool thing is that puts the onus on you. I'm not going to tell you what works and what doesn't work, what's practical, what's impractical, right? I'll show you what's elaborate. I'll show you what's simple. I'll show you what's sophisticated. And I'll show you what is simple. I'll show you fine motor and I'll show you gross motor. You make the determination, because I don't know you. I often say this. I don't know you. I'm not your daddy. No idea. So I'm going to do some stuff and you're going to determine if that is for you based on the work that you put into it and who you are, what you do, what your capabilities are, things like that. So I was like, damn, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, let's talk about circumstances where it does make sense to transition from knife to gun, and it's not in this like cool Instagram way where we're rapidly doing it like that. So one was actually covered by another brother of mine, Jared Wihungi, in a module that is actually, I believe, I don't know if it's available now, but there he has knife. He releases knife modules, and they're primarily based on law enforcement and military applications, but with bridges to civilian self-defense, right? And if you watch the full videos, he makes it very clear where those lines are drawn. And so one logical knife to gun transition, and Jared covers this in depth, but both Zero and Sal covered it briefly in our conversation, is if, for example, the access to your primary tool is somehow obstructed. Maybe they've got a hand on it and you're in a weapon retention kind of condition. You could transition to this, bang, 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 free it up, and then you transition to gun. That makes sense. That makes sense. And that's why the module is called Duty Knife as a backup weapon. Does that make sense to you guys? Let me know if that makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense that if I'm carrying both a knife and a gun, I'm going to prioritize going to gun. If that's obstructed and there's a fight for that gun, yes, this is still a hands-on thing. But if I have a weapon, a tool that I can use to gain the advantage, to free up the weapon that I actually want to go to, that makes sense. That makes sense going from knife to gun. All right, but how do we train that? Do we train that like oh my God, boom? Like, how do we train that solo? Right? To train that solo might just be something like that, just to get the reps in, getting it in from all sorts of awkward angles and positions, right? And again, what value does that solo practice have beyond just familiarization with where you're carrying things and how your tools mechanically operate? Like, solo practice can only take you so far, but solo practice with good visualization and intent is better than no practice at all. So maybe that's one way that we can train knife to gun transition. Certainly not this cool Instagram way, if we want to keep it real. So another logical knife to gun transition is if we already have knife in hand. Reason. Like maybe you're cutting your steak. There's probably a lot of reasons why you might already have a knife in your hand for some purpose. Something escalates, right? And then you need to transition to lethal force. And so we might need to work on some of this stuff, right? We might need to work on some of this stuff. But again, for the most part, I agree. I agree with Sal. I agree with Zero that simply repping out these, close quarter imagined scenarios. I'm at a restaurant, and then some guy steps up to me, and then I go to my knife, and then I go to my gun, and then I get up, and then I, do all that stuff. Now, I'm open to hear the other side of this conversation, right? It's not the end of the conversation. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I'm influenced, right, by my affiliation and affinity for these gentlemen. Maybe I'm a bit dogmatic, right? Maybe I love these guys and I trust them. So if you guys know of anyone who might be willing to have this discussion, not about right and wrong, right? Because really the statement I'm trying to say is knife to gun transitions are mostly bullshit. And I use the term mostly because a lot of what we see is mostly that cool kind of, bang, bang. So if you guys can think of another condition or circumstance worth training for, right? Because again, I love training like improbable stuff just for the challenge. And I think more people ought to admit that, more people ought to admit that. But, if your life depended on it, and your reality reflected a real need to train these things, you can use me as an initial inspiration, right? But I would suggest to seek credible training, right? And as far as depth goes, I'm constantly in the exploration phase. So when it comes to like life and death stuff, I don't know if I can do that, right? But I am always willing to share the things that I'm thinking about at the moment. And again, the accountability rests solely on the practitioner for me. Okay, let's get to the comments. Here we go. What do I do if I'm having my gun jammed? Okay, my gun is jammed. There's a malfunction. One hand on the gun, one hand on the knife. Should I drop my knife now to unjam my gun? I would freaking, if you were in this condition already, like you found yourself in this condition, okay, so for me, this is a question of what's more valuable and how much did I train in one versus the other, right? Like this doesn't malfunction, but you would never drop a gun because of a malfunction. That becomes a huge liability. So yeah, maybe you can do all of all of, and try to manage all of that. You can tap rack and give it a shot. But if I'm just answering your question honestly, yeah, I would just drop the knife, right? And sort this out, right? Because if you can't resolve whatever is happening here, I mean, it's still a good chunk of metal, right? It's still a good chunk of metal. And if assuming again, we're getting deep into the weeds here. We're getting and I'm these are just I'm expressing ideas. I'm not telling you what to do, or I don't even know if what I'm saying is actually good. I'm just kind of approaching it from limited perspective, but from a logical perspective based on what I know right now. So yeah, but if you find yourself gun in one hand, knife on the other, and then your gun jams, oh, do you drop your knife? Jeez, right? Yeah, I think so. I think you want to prioritize resolving that gun. Brian Canada. I think the important thing to consider is how people react to being stabbed. Is the reaction going to be enough to allow you to transition? Crapshoot. But, again, if you're going to use your knife as a means to trying to earn yourself time and space to draw your firearm, that too is a gamble, right? Like there are certain target areas where it's like no matter how much or how little, it's going to have an effect, right? Some, not so much. So you're still relying on this thing working, right? And if you can do this, you can do this without, when seconds matter, right? Like you're going wherever that knife may be, right? And maybe you can draw that knife fast, but you're adding an extra factor, an extra moving part that could go wrong. Whereas if you could have just pushed the dude, you elected to draw your knife and it gets caught. And then like you drop it, then you're 2 steps behind, right? So, like in close quarters, hands to gun, eliminating, hands, knife to gun makes sense. It just makes sense to me logically. Let's see. A knife, Adam Davies says, a knife might be a better option for drawing during extreme close quarters. And once that immediate threat is dealt with, or you have created distance, or another threat is approaching at distance, then going to your firearm would then be a better option. I can imagine a circumstance where you might be right. And that is when you haven't trained well enough to defend your gun and retain it in close quarters, which ought to be a priority. But, apparently it's a big problem that people think that they'll just shoot the guy, that they can somehow just magically get to their gun. They haven't trained any sort of combatives skill sets to be able to, number one, access, number two, be able to fight and retain that firearm, right? Again, I am not coming at this from any perspective of experience. The only thing that I've done is I've spent a great deal of time and effort training with and speaking with a whole lot of people. And when I find commonalities in what they say, I feel some level of confidence in both what they said and in my understanding of it to be able to at least facilitate this conversation. That's all, right? Don't get the wrong idea. I am not the expert. So, Adam, that's a great point. That's a great point. A knife might be a better option for drawing during extreme close quarters, but under 2 caveats that are like big issues. Number one, under extreme close quarters, people aren't training, freaking clinch work. And I just spat at the camera. People aren't training how to navigate that extreme close quarter engagement with their empty hands, right? But if you did, like, then you ought to be able to win those moments, gain time and distance, and if lethal force is justified, go to your gun, right? And again, I say all of these caveats and nuances because I don't want to sound like those guys who are just like, oh, just shoot him. Oh, just shoot him. Close quarter, I'll just shoot him. No, right? Like, you make a good point. It might be a better option to use your knife in extreme close quarters, but not if you are confident in navigating the complexities of close quarters with your hands and using it to facilitate earning time and space to draw your lethal force option. So when it comes to that point, right? And by the way, you roll with somebody like a Todd Fossey or a Greg Nelson or a Ryan Hoover, or freaking any jujitsu or wrestler, black belt, not a jiu-jitsu black belt or a wrestler, in those extreme close quarters, right? You think you're going to draw your knife and it's going to work for you? Bro, they'll be using that knife to cut you faster than you can imagine. Like, I've rolled with dudes who just dominated me in extreme close quarters. I was able to draw, like Kenny Big B Jr., another guy. You draw a knife against somebody who's superior at you in close quarters, and you will have a very bad day. Very, very bad day. So, Adam, thank you for that. I think that's a great course of reflection and thought that we can all think about. But again, no clear-cut answers, right? Appreciate that, though. Very good, very good. I love that. Love that. Kyun Woo again. Greetings from Manoso Todo, Bukidnon, Mindanao, Philippines. Shout out to my Pinoys. I love you people, my people. Brian, if most people that have been stabbed report that they felt they got punched, then later realized they had been stabbed. Yeah, that's true. Would it not be a logical conclusion to say that in the moment, the knife does not create enough of the sort of trauma that would allow you to make space? Yeah. Hell yeah. Absolutely. Very logical. And I have heard that, not just from the internet, but from a lot of people that I've spoken to who have gotten stabbed. They didn't know. They didn't know they were cut until afterwards. And then sometimes there's that adrenaline dump that happens that is just like, oh, all of a sudden your capillaries open up and you actually start bleeding more, and then it becomes a shit show. Right. So what you're saying is that, yeah, a lot of reports, anecdotal stuff, say that, yeah, these people didn't know they were getting stabbed. They felt something warm after the fact, and they're like, oh shit. So get good with your hands. Get good with your hands. Okay. Nicolas Mandragon. Here in Colombia, the internal holster is very common, for which reason this movement would be difficult. Yeah. I practice it, though. I also practice the bullshit knife to gun transition from concealment, but I also I practice it vice versa, even though that makes less sense to go from your gun. You already have the gun to transition to knife. But again, I study these things and I don't do it so frequently that it becomes like habit. I just do it as a mental challenge, right? Transitioning, boom, bang, one to the other. They're just cool little puzzle pieces for me to play with, right? Seek credible training sources. Don't look at me for this gun stuff. Kyunwoo, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. It reminds us how our GM let you double leg takedown, and as long as you can control the position, you legally reach for his knife. Yeah, cool. Double leg takedown defense, super important. Super important. Drop what's in your hands, and yeah. A good trainer is John from Active Self Protection. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if John from Active Self Protection is a good trainer. Don't know. I've never seen him teach. But there is a there is the potential for him to be a good teacher. I'll say that, but I don't know, so I can't say. I can't say. He does examine a lot of videos, but even then, listen. Yes, a lot of deadly force encounters are documented more and more these days because of CCTV and mobile phones, but it's still a disproportionately low percentage of all crimes that occur. And so even if you have 2,000 videos of deadly force encounters, that's nowhere near what actually ends up happening. So there is a danger in claiming evidence based only on what is captured on CCTV, right? And if you think about, anyway, that's enough about that. Like, sometimes this can come across as, disrespect, but I'm just saying what I believe is true. Okay. Iron Tree, what's up? Getting to any weapon under stress is a lot harder than folks think. You're working behind a curve, unless you have a third hand. Making space is priority one. Yeah. Even in close quarters, making space is often a priority, unless it's not. Right? Unless it's not. We can talk about this. Like, yeah, how much space can you earn in an elevator, right? Things like that. You better be good in close quarters with your hands. Yeah. And if not, again, none of this is definitive, right? Like, you have to work with your abilities and disabilities, right? Like it or not. I want to quote like Phil Elmore. Some people love him, some people dismiss him because he's fat. And he talks about this in his video. He's a fat guy. He's not even like really fat or anything, but he's a combatives instructor, and sometimes people will comment on the internet like, oh, how can I trust a combatives instructor who's like overweight? And then he goes, he's never going to argue with anyone who says like, go to the gym and work out and be an athlete, and that's going to help you with your ability to defend yourself. No one's ever going to argue that. But for whatever reason, whether it's medical or circumstantial, like, it would be cool if everyone was just healthy and we all didn't eat Cheetos and eat McDonald's. But people eat McDonald's, and some people are fat. And does that mean like the only course of action for self-defense we give them is go to the gym? No. So Phil Elmore is a big proponent that self-defense is for everybody. And something is better than nothing to a degree, but also it's a slippery slope, because that's also where you get the whole I'll just shoot the guy mentality, and they don't train how to navigate through clinch and close quarters. Anyway, that's it. I think that's it. You don't need 1,000 videos. Let's see here. You don't need 1,000 videos to know the behavior of an attacker. The leveraging arm is one very common action. Yeah, you mean like indexing, right? Something like 70% of all knife attacks is off an index. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Oh yeah, I get it. I mean, I gotta be honest. It's a little tough to take you that seriously with that profile picture, though. I'm just playing, but I don't know you. But yes, you like active cell protection. Cool, go for it. I like the channel, and there's certainly good lessons to be learned there. Anyway, Phil is all about work with it. That's it. Yeah, work with what you got. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I like that. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate your time. 35 minutes. That's going to be one of my shorter podcasts. Get to the point. Knife to gun transitions are mostly bullshit with a few critical exceptions. That's worth exploring. But the long and short of it is that, these are not magic pills. We need this and this, and for sure this, right, to be able to optimally navigate through the utilization of these tools. Dope. All right. Tis it for now. Thank you guys. We'll end it right here. Peace.